It started with silence. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that screams. The kind that makes everyone in the room realize something irreversible has just happened. Prince William stood frozen, his jaw clenched. His eyes, usually calm and diplomatic, were sharp, cutting through the tension that filled the palace drawing room like fog. Across from him, his father sat still, hands gripping the armrests, trying to process what he'd just heard. The air felt thick, heavy, electric. And in that moment, one truth echoed in everyone's mind. Harry had gone too far. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what exactly did he say? What could a son, a brother, a prince, say so explosively that the family would decide to ban him altogether? Imagine that. A royal born into centuries of duty and privilege, now standing on the brink of total exile because of a few whispered words. Words spoken in private. Words that were never supposed to leave that room. Yet they did. And when William finally revealed them, the entire monarchy stopped breathing. This isn't just another royal feud. This is betrayal at the deepest level, the kind that doesn't just break relationships. It fractures the very foundation of the crown. Viewers, ask yourselves, how far would you go for the truth? Would you expose your own blood if it meant protecting your legacy? Or would you stay silent and carry the weight of those words forever? Because William couldn't stay silent. Not this time. The tension had been building for months, ever since Harry and Meghan's last public move had blindsided the palace yet again. Behind the smiling portraits and public statements of unity, there was chaos. Meetings, phone calls, panic. The senior royals knew something was brewing, and it wasn't good. Then came that meeting, what insiders now call the final confrontation. A private gathering meant to heal wounds. But instead, it detonated them. According to palace insiders, it was Charles who insisted on it. "We must bring him back into the fold," he reportedly told William. "We must at least try." But William hesitated. He knew his brother's tone had changed, his words sharper, his patience thinner. Harry had become unpredictable, defiant, even bitter. Still, the king wanted peace. So the invitations went out quietly. No aides, no staff, no cameras, just family. But as soon as the doors closed, peace was the last thing they found. Harry's frustration spilled out like years of pent-up anger. Every grievance, every insult, every moment he felt unheard. He spoke of betrayal, of lies, of being used as a scapegoat. But then, something shifted. He crossed a line. And when William repeated those particular words later, the family's response was instant. The Queen's old rule, never complain, never explain, shattered in that moment. Because this wasn't about public image anymore. This was about survival. But let's pause here. Before that infamous meeting, before the so-called unforgivable comment, the cracks were already deepening. Harry's distance wasn't just emotional, it was ideological. He wasn't just leaving the royal family. He was rejecting the system that made them who they were. And that terrified them. Inside the palace, whispers turned into warnings. "He's planning something big," one courtier allegedly said. "Something that could damage the institution forever." It wasn't the first time the family had faced rebellion. Remember Edward VIII? He too walked away, for love. But Harry's defiance felt different. It wasn't romantic, it was revolutionary. He wanted to dismantle the very machine that raised him. But here's the contradiction that makes this story irresistible. For all his claims of independence, Harry couldn't stop talking about the family he left behind. Interviews, podcasts, documentaries, every time he spoke, the palace braced for impact. And yet, in private, he said something even more dangerous. Something William knew could never stay buried. So the question remains, what do you do when your brother becomes your greatest liability? For William, the answer came slowly, painfully. He'd defended Harry for years, against courtiers, against headlines, even against his own father. But there comes a point when loyalty becomes complicity, when protecting someone means destroying everything else you've sworn to uphold. That's the line William faced. Behind every headline about royal rifts was a man torn between blood and crown. He wasn't just the older brother anymore. He was the heir, the future king. And in that role, silence was no longer an option. So when he finally spoke, when he revealed what Harry had said, there was no going back. Picture it. The room still, the curtains drawn, Charles staring at his son in disbelief. An aide discreetly leaving to avoid witnessing what came next. William's voice shaking, not with anger, but with something colder. "Duty," he said. Those two words were enough to freeze everyone in place. And what followed was the moment that ended any chance of reconciliation. Now, we've all seen the public side of the story, the smiles, the statements, the polished interviews. But behind the facade, insiders say this was the breaking point that made the palace draft an unprecedented internal directive. Prince Harry was no longer welcome within royal circles. Banished. Not officially. Of course, the monarchy loves subtlety. But make no mistake, this was a ban in every sense that mattered. Exclusion from future royal events. Loss of access. Silence from family members who once called daily. For the first time, Harry found himself truly on the outside. And here's the irony. This entire downfall didn't begin with betrayal from outsiders. It began with a confession, with words whispered in trust, in privacy. So why did William expose them? Because those words, once spoken, couldn't be unheard. And according to palace insiders, what Harry revealed wasn't just damaging, it was dangerous. Some say it touched on the monarchy's finances. Others claim it involved a truth about their mother, Princess Diana, that could have rewritten history itself. Whatever it was, it shook the family to its core. And when William walked out of that room, he knew something had changed forever. He was no longer just Harry's brother. He was the man who had to choose the crown over blood. And that choice, once made, sealed Harry's fate. Think about it. A single moment, one decision, and centuries of royal tradition teetering on the edge. The same institution that once survived wars, scandals, and abdications, now torn apart by two brothers who once promised they'd never let history repeat itself. But history always repeats itself, doesn't it? Especially in this family. Maybe that's the tragic beauty of it. The monarchy endures, but love doesn't. And as we move deeper into this story, we'll uncover what really happened inside that final meeting. The exact words that changed the royal family's future. The hidden reactions, the private phone calls, and the fallout no one saw coming. Because after William revealed what Harry said, the crown didn't just respond. It retaliated. And that's where our story truly begins. What happened in that next meeting, when the family confronted Harry face to face, would push both brothers past the point of no return. And when the truth finally came out, it left the monarchy reeling. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. They called it a reunion. But make no mistake, this wasn't a warm family gathering. It was an ambush. The palace's great drawing room, usually a sanctuary of composure and control, felt like a battlefield disguised in royal elegance. The heavy drapes muffled the sounds of the outside world. The golden frames of long-dead monarchs stared down like silent judges, and the tension, it was suffocating. No press, no cameras, no advisors. Just King Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry. 3 men, one truth, and a silence so sharp it could cut glass. From the moment Harry stepped in, everyone knew this would not be easy. He wasn't the same man who left the palace in 2020. Gone was the nervous, unsure younger brother. What stood before them was a defiant figure, calm, composed, and somehow colder. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried the edge of a man who'd rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times. "So," Harry began quietly, "you wanted to see me." Charles's tone was hesitant, fatherly, even. "We wanted to speak, yes. We thought it best to talk privately, without distractions." Distractions. The unspoken word hung in the air like smoke. They all knew what it meant. Meghan. Cameras. Headlines. The brand of Harry and Meghan had become bigger, bolder, louder than the crown itself. William sat stiff, hands clasped. He didn't say a word, but his eyes did. Every look said, "This is your last chance." But Harry wasn't there to apologize. He was there to be heard. "You think I wanted any of this?" he said, his voice rising slightly. "Do you know what it's like to be treated like an inconvenience in your own family? To watch your wife get torn apart and no one does anything?" Charles sighed, the weight of kingship and fatherhood colliding. "Harry, you know we tried." "No," Harry interrupted. "You tried to protect the institution. Not me. Not Meghan. You protected the brand, the image, the crown." The air crackled. Even the ticking clock seemed to hesitate. William finally spoke. "You think we don't bleed the same?" You think you're the only one who's suffered? The difference is, we don't burn the house down when things get hard. Harry laughed, sharp, hollow. The house was already burning. I just refused to die in it. And there it was, the first real blow. Not physical, but emotional. The kind of line that makes the walls themselves listen. You could almost feel centuries of royal pride quivering. This wasn't just a family argument. It was the collapse of something sacred. Charles leaned forward. You have no idea what it means to carry this burden, Harry. The press, the scrutiny, the expectation. We all live under it. Harry shook his head. No, father. You hide under it. You've always hidden behind the crown. I wanted to live outside it. It was more than rebellion. It was a declaration. And then, the moment that would haunt the family forever. Because somewhere between accusation and heartbreak, Harry said something that froze the room. Something that would later be described as the unforgivable comment. The exact words remain disputed. Some say he questioned the legitimacy of the monarchy itself. Others claim he referenced an event tied to Diana, something long buried, something dangerous. But whatever he said, William's reaction said it all. He went pale. His jaw tightened. His hand trembled against the armrest. Do you even hear yourself? William said through clenched teeth. Do you realize what you're saying? Harry didn't flinch. For once, yes. I finally do. Charles's face fell. Harry, you've gone too far. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The air was thick with shock. The kind of silence that doesn't end. It lingers, echoing through generations. And then, in a soft but deadly calm, William said, You've just made your choice. It wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. Harry looked between them. Father, brother, two men bound by duty. And yet, somehow, further away from him than ever before. He turned toward the window, watching the gray London sky blur behind raindrops. Maybe that's for the best, he murmured. But in that quiet defiance lay something deeper. A sadness. A fracture that would never heal. Let's pause for a second, viewers. Imagine being in that room. Imagine knowing that every word you say could destroy your legacy or set you free. Which would you choose? Freedom or forgiveness? Because Harry chose freedom, and it cost him everything. After that day, things were never the same. According to palace sources, William left the meeting in silence, barely looking back. He reportedly told an aide, he doesn't understand what he's done. Charles, on the other hand, remained seated long after Harry left, staring at the same spot where his son had stood, as if still hearing the echo of those words. The aftermath was swift, brutal, and secretive. Behind palace walls, a storm began to brew. Advisors scrambled. Legal teams were quietly briefed. Communication lines were cut. The message was clear. Harry was no longer part of the fold. But the irony? No one dared make it official. The monarchy doesn't ban, it freezes out. And that's exactly what they did. Days later, William and Charles reportedly met again, without Harry. This time, the tone was strategic, not emotional. We can't afford another scandal. One insider quoted Charles as saying, We must protect the institution. That's when William spoke the words that would mark the end. Then we must do what's necessary. And what was necessary? Cut him off. Not through a public statement. Not through a confrontation. But through silence. A weapon the royals have mastered for centuries. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. Family events became private affairs. Harry's name was quietly removed from schedules and communications. It was exile in slow motion. And Harry, watching from across the Atlantic, felt the chill. He'd always said he wanted independence, but this was isolation. There's a difference between leaving and being left behind. Those close to him say he tried to reach out, emails, messages, even letters. But the responses were brief, polite, and empty. The warmth was gone. And then came the leaks. Anonymous sources began hinting about the meeting, how Harry's words had deeply offended the family, how certain remarks were unforgivable. The palace didn't confirm or deny a thing. They didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than any denial ever could. Meanwhile, in California, Meghan was reportedly furious, not just at the royals, but at the way the narrative was slipping out of their control. For years, she and Harry had shaped their story through interviews and streaming deals. Now the palace had taken the lead again, weaponizing whispers. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. What if the leak didn't come from the palace at all? What if it came from someone closer to home? Rumors began swirling of a friend in Harry's circle who'd spoken to the media, perhaps out of loyalty, perhaps out of guilt. Whoever it was, the story had escaped. And once royal secrets escape, they never die. Public fascination exploded overnight. Every outlet speculated on what Harry had said. Some headlines suggested treason. Others painted him as a truth-teller silenced by power. But one thing united them all: the idea that the royal family had finally turned its back on its most rebellious son. And if the world needed confirmation, it came days later, when Harry's name was noticeably missing from the guest list of a key royal event. That was the beginning of the end. Inside the palace, courtiers called it damage control. Outside, the world called it what it was: banishment. But let's not forget the emotional core here. Behind the protocol and press releases were three men, a father and two sons, each convinced they were doing the right thing. Charles thought he was saving the monarchy. William thought he was protecting the future. Harry thought he was speaking his truth. And somehow they all lost. Because after that day, nothing was the same. Insiders say Charles withdrew completely, relying on advisors for communication. William, on the other hand, carried guilt, mixed with anger. He'd never wanted to expose his brother, but he couldn't unhear those words. And Harry? He found himself alone with the realization that freedom isn't as peaceful as it sounds. But what's most haunting is this: the palace didn't respond publicly because it didn't have to. They had something far more powerful, a secret, something tied to the very words Harry spoke that day. A secret William carried with him, buried deep beneath royal restraint and brotherly sorrow. And when that secret finally surfaced, it would ignite the most devastating fallout the monarchy had seen since Diana's death. Because those words Harry said, they weren't just reckless. They were revealing. And someone had recorded them. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. No one outside that room was ever supposed to hear the words. Not the staff, not the aides, not the press. But words, especially royal ones, have a way of escaping. It started as a whisper, then a rumor, then a full-blown storm. And somewhere in between, those words that Prince Harry uttered, those few sentences that silenced an entire family, became legend. What did he say? What could possibly be so unforgivable that the king himself reportedly ordered Harry's permanent exclusion from royal affairs? Let's rewind. After that tense meeting at the palace, insiders say William was visibly shaken. He'd kept his composure in front of his father and brother, but as soon as he left the room, something in him broke. One aide, who spoke under condition of anonymity, described it like this: William walked out pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He just kept saying, "He can't unsay that. He can't ever unsay that." And what Harry couldn't unsay would soon become the most dangerous secret in modern royal history. Now, depending on who you ask, there are two versions of that moment, two narratives fighting for dominance. One paints Harry as a son finally standing up to hypocrisy. The other paints him as a man who crossed a sacred boundary, one even his late mother never dared to cross. According to multiple palace insiders, the trigger came when Charles tried to reason with him. "Harry," he said softly, "the monarchy is not perfect, but it's the only way we survive as a family." And Harry snapped. "Survive as a family," he repeated bitterly. "You mean survive as an image?" Then, in a moment that would echo through royal history, he reportedly said something no royal had ever said aloud in front of a reigning monarch. "You all lied about Mom. You covered it up. And now you expect me to pretend you're victims?" Silence. Not the respectful kind, but the heavy, horrified kind. William's head shot up. Charles froze. Harry continued, his voice trembling between fury and grief. "You think people still believe in the fairy tale? They don't. The whole world knows what you did to her. And to me." Charles's tone cracked. "Harry, enough." But Harry wasn't done. He took a step closer. "You can rewrite the press, the documentaries, the official records, but you'll never rewrite what really happened. She died because of this family, because of the crown." It wasn't just anger. It was an accusation, one that struck at the monarchy's darkest wound. William stood abruptly. "You don't mean that." "I do," Harry shot back. "You've all been pretending for decades. But deep down, you know it's true." And that, according to several sources, is when Charles reportedly said something chilling. "Be very careful what you say next, Harry. You are not just my son. You are a member of this family. And that comes with consequences." But Harry, defiant, said the words that sealed his fate. Then maybe I don't want to be part of this family anymore. That was it. The breaking point. The moment when the brotherhood fractured for good. And here's the cruel irony. Harry's truth may have been rooted in pain, but his delivery made it sound like rebellion. That silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. By refusing to comment, the palace let the narrative evolve on its own, fueling speculation while maintaining dignity. It's the oldest royal tactic in the book. When accused, say nothing. Let your opponent drown in their own noise. And Harry did. Every interview, every public statement he made afterward was dissected for hidden meaning. Was he hinting at the same accusation? Was he still blaming the family for Diana's death? The irony is brutal. Harry's intent may have been to speak his truth, but perception is everything. And perception turned him into the villain of his own story. Because while he spoke of pain, the palace projected patience. While he raged, they remained silent. And in the eyes of the public, silence often looks like grace. But inside, William was anything but graceful. He was livid, not just at Harry, but at himself. He couldn't stop replaying the words in his head. You covered it up. She died because of the crown. He'd spent his whole adult life defending the institution, balancing public service with private grief. And now, his own brother had turned that grief into a weapon. That night, William reportedly told Kate, "He's gone too far this time. There's no way back." Kate, always measured, simply asked, "What will you do?" William didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Because within days, palace sources began preparing a statement, not a public one, but an internal memo that effectively froze Harry's royal privileges. He wouldn't be invited to state events. He wouldn't receive briefings or correspondence. He was, for all intents and purposes, cut off. But the bigger problem? The leak wouldn't stop. 1 week after the confrontation, a senior royal correspondent released a bombshell article suggesting that the palace had irreversible internal divisions. The piece hinted that one senior royal had accused the institution of being complicit in past tragedies. Everyone knew who it meant, and that's when the story shifted from a private rift to a global scandal. Journalists began combing through old footage of Diana's interviews, Harry's memoir, even archived royal documents, looking for clues. Public sympathy, once divided, began to sway. Was Harry really crazy, or was he just saying what everyone else had been too afraid to admit? That's when William made his fateful decision. He would reveal the words himself, not to the public, but to the inner circle of the royal family. He had to, because if they were going to protect the monarchy, they needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. And so, one quiet afternoon, the family gathered again. Charles, Camilla, and William. No Harry. William reportedly took a deep breath, then repeated the words verbatim. Every syllable, every accusation, every haunting echo of Diana's ghost. When he finished, no one spoke, not even Anne. Camilla's face was reportedly ashen. Charles sat perfectly still, hands trembling slightly, and finally broke the silence. He said that. William nodded. He said all of it. The room was cold, dead quiet. Then Charles stood up, slowly, deliberately. Then it's decided, he said. He cannot return. And just like that, the youngest son of the king, the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin, the man who said he wanted nothing more than peace, was exiled by his own blood. But here's where things took an even more shocking turn. Because while the family closed ranks, someone else wasn't so quiet. An anonymous source, possibly a staff member who'd been outside the room, began leaking details of the conversation to the international press. Not just what Harry said, but what was said about him afterward. And buried in those leaks was a single, chilling claim. That there existed an audio recording of the confrontation. A recording that could prove every word Harry said. If that were true, it would mean the monarchy's darkest secret. The accusation about Diana might actually have been caught on tape. And that possibility terrified them. Because once truth meets technology, silence is no longer power, it's vulnerability. The palace knew it. The media knew it. And somewhere, perhaps across the ocean, Harry knew it too. He'd lit the fuse. And the explosion was coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. He didn't sleep. Not for a minute. Not after repeating those words to the inner circle. Not after watching the room go still, as if history itself were holding its breath. In our story, William stared at the ceiling of a room that had never felt like his. The ornate plaster, the chandeliers, the portraits lining the corridor outside. All of it heavy, all of it borrowed. A life on loan until duty stamped it permanent. He told himself, tonight I chose the crown. And somewhere beneath that, tonight I chose against my brother. Which choice would time punish? Morning arrived the way power often does, quietly. Curtains stirred. Footsteps faded past his door. The palace woke up to the unchanged ritual of silver trays and structured silence. But inside William, the ritual was broken. He moved like a soldier after battle. The body remembered what the mind refused to accept. He dressed without thinking. Tie, jacket, the armor of a future king. The mirror stared back with a question. What are you if you cannot protect your own? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was simple and unbearable. In this imagined world, the words his brother spoke were too dangerous to ignore. Words have gravity. Some crush reputations. Some split time. Some, when whispered in the wrong room, redraw family lines like borders after war. Was it betrayal to repeat them? Or salvation? He crossed the corridor, feeling the hush of the portraits. Ancestors watched, oil and varnish pretending not to judge. But he felt judged. He always had. Downstairs, the private office felt colder than it should have. A small fire crackled, too polite to warm the room. He poured tea and let it sit untouched, a ceremony for steadiness. He needed to be methodical now, measured, and somehow human. A knock. Soft, respectful, familiar. He didn't turn. Come. And entered first in our story. Not because protocol demanded it, but because pragmatism did. She closed the door behind her with a click that sounded like a verdict. You look like hell, she said. He almost smiled. Good morning to you, too. Is it? Her tone was dry, almost kind. You did what had to be done. He kept his gaze on the window, the gardens beyond. Do you ever wonder where the line is? I spend my life on it, she said. And when in doubt, I err on the side of the crown. It's the only thing that outlives us. He breathed out. He's still my brother. And you're still the future, she replied. The job doesn't wait for our feelings to settle. Feelings? The words sounded naive in this room. Was there another way? He asked. Yes, she said. But it would have asked you to betray either your brother or your duty outright. You split the difference. You told the truth to the only people who needed to hear it. He flinched. Truth feels like treachery when it hurts someone you love. That, and said softly, is the cost of stewardship. They stood in silence. A bird flicked across the glass, a momentary shadow. The world outside didn't care that a family had fractured inside these walls. The lawns remained precise. The sky refused drama. I need to see Father, William said. He knows, she replied. I need to look him in the eye. And nodded. He's ready. When he entered the king's study in our imagined universe, sunlight fractured across the desk. Papers stacked with a discipline that felt theatrical, as if the appearance of order could hold chaos at bay. The king did not stand. He didn't need to. Years had taught him that power rarely raised its voice or its body. It simply existed and was obeyed. You told them, the king said. I did, William answered. You were right to do so. Right. The word landed strangely. Right is a word for textbooks, not families. The king studied his son for a long moment. You think yourself a traitor to your brother. I think I chose my duty over him, William replied. Both can be true, the king said. And both can be forgivable. By whom? History, the king answered. If it is kind. They regarded each other. Father and son. Monarch and heir. Two men who loved a boy they could no longer reach without setting the house on fire. Is there a path back? William asked quietly. There's a path, the king said. But I don't know if he'll take it. And I don't know if we can afford to wait at its gate. William closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When he spoke, his voice held steady. Then we decide today how to live with the aftermath. They spoke in low tones, about boundaries and briefings, about invitations that would not be sent and doors that would not be opened. Mechanisms of distance disguised as policy. In our story, the king signed a memorandum that no one would ever see, a paper that felt like an erasure and a safeguard at once. Remember this, the king said at last. You did not create this tragedy. You responded to it. But I amplified it, William said. Perhaps, the king replied. But there is a difference between a match and a forest. When William left the study, the corridor felt longer. Doors receded. The morning tasted of dust. He wanted air, but found protocol. He wanted his brother, but found the crown. He climbed a narrow staircase used by staff who knew how to avoid being seen. At the landing, he paused. The hum of a palace is subtle, a cough down the hall, a murmur behind a door, shoes on polished stone. The sound of a machine that runs on discretion. Kate was waiting in a smaller sitting room that had become their refuge. A sofa that knew their conversations. A lamp that knew their silences. She rose. How bad? He shook his head. There isn't a scale. She crossed to him, and he felt, for a moment, the mercy of an ordinary gesture. A hand at his shoulder. Warmth without strategy. In our story, she said gently, you chose the thing you were born to hold. That doesn't mean you don't love the person you're losing. What if I lose both? He asked. She didn't answer quickly. Thoughtfulness was her weapon. Then we keep choosing each other, she said, and we keep choosing the work. And we pray the circle is big enough to include him again one day. He looked out at the gardens and saw not hedges, but mazes. There are rumors about a recording. She stiffened. Is it real? I don't know, he said. But the rumor alone is a fuse. If it exists, she said, who holds it? The wrong person, he replied. They let the possibility hang. The room seemed smaller with it. More combustible. What will you do? She asked. He wanted to say, I will run. I will drive to the airport. I will go to him and break into 1,000 apologies and 1,000 demands and 1,000 embraces that might rebuild the bridge we burned. But he said, I will do the job. Then I will do it with you, she replied. He kissed her forehead. In that small vow, the day found a spine. The schedule did not care about grief. It rarely does. Meetings, briefings, a hospital visit, a patronage call, smiles arranged like chess pieces, each one in a place that protected the king, the heir, the illusion. But in our narrative, William carried the absence like a second suit. He shook hands and heard echoes. He listened to speeches and heard his brothers laugh. He saw cameras and thought of traps. He signed programs and imagined headlines that would turn his family into content. Between engagements, a private secretary intercepted him with a tablet. 2 items you should see, she said. He scanned. The first, a columnist insinuating that the family's silence hid irreparable fractures. The second, an anonymous tip sent to a foreign outlet claiming that the truth will be heard. Attached was nothing. No file. No audio. Just 4 words. He said it all. What do we know of the sender? William asked. Disposable email. Routed through multiple servers. It could be anyone. Or it could be exactly who we fear, he said. We're monitoring, the secretary replied. Monitor faster. When he stepped into the car, the door sealed like a confessional. Take the long way, he told the driver. The city slid past, indifferent and alive. He watched strangers cross between buses and bicycles and thought, no one here knows that a family is deciding the temperature of a nation's fever. No one here knows that I, who look serene through tinted glass, am counting every way a rumor can become ruin. He closed his eyes and saw another room entirely. Not a study, not a corridor. A kitchen somewhere oceans away. Sunlight on a marble island. Coffee cooling next to a phone that would not stop buzzing. In our story, Harry stood barefoot, reading messages that didn't ask if he was okay. They asked if he was sure. Are you sure you said that? Are you sure you want to go this far? Are you sure you can bear it? Harry didn't answer. He turned the phone face down as if it were an accusation. He walked to the sink and turned on the tap, watching water run as if it were absolution. He wanted a message from his brother that did not strategize or admonish. He wanted a message that said, I remember us in the garden when the world was small. I remember when we were 2 boys and 1 shadow. I remember when our grief made us allies instead of adversaries. It didn't come. Back in London, William's day bent under the weight of the rumor. He moved through obligations like a metronome, steady in public, unspooling in private. He answered questions about funding and initiatives and the weather as if answering a riddle whose answer was always, carry on. Between events, he returned to the palace by a side entrance painted with secrecy. The private corridor felt more private than usual. He pressed his palm to the study door, then let it fall. He didn't go in. He went to the chapel instead. No cameras. No staff. The air a patient witness. He sat where the morning light braided into color through stained glass. He did not pray for victory. He prayed for clarity. He prayed for the thing no one admits to wanting, a way to protect everything at once. His phone vibrated. A single message from a contact saved under a name that wasn't a name. A security liaison. The kind of person who never smiles in corridors. We have something. Not the file. A location. He stood. He felt something he had not felt all week. Direction. He walked fast, because purpose moves the feet. Outside the chapel, an aide joined him, almost floating to keep pace. Sir, tell them I'm unavailable for the next hour. Shall I reschedule? Everything, he said, quietly. In our fictional universe, a small team met him in a room that smelled of paper and worry. A map lay flat on the table, a red circle drawn around a part of the city that he had only ever seen in motorcades and childhood field trips. That's where the sender signed into the email, the liaison said. A co-working space. Walk-in clients. Hourly rentals. Cameras? William asked. Internal and external, the liaison replied. We've requested footage. Requested? For now. He held the map like a lifeline. Who else knows? Two of us, the liaison said. And now you. Keep it that way. The room breathed relief and panic at once. It always does when the path forward arrives wearing a new problem. If there's footage, he said, we'll have a face. If, the liaison said carefully. He nodded. If. He dismissed them with gratitude, he did not say out loud. There are words that make men weak in rooms like these. Thank you is one of them. He returned to the refuge room where Kate still waited, a book open, unread. Well, she asked. A dot on a map, he said. A dot is a start. He sat and let the silence tell them both what hope costs. Then he told her the part he couldn't tell anyone else. I keep replaying the moment, he said. What if I had said nothing? What if I had held his words inside like a secret that ate me slowly? Couldn't that have been my service? To swallow the poison so no one else would taste it. She closed the book and took his hand. You would have died by inches, she said. And when they made you king, you would have been a haunted one. You chose to be the kind that lives. He tried to smile. It landed badly. And what if I chose to be the kind that loses his brother? She didn't look away. Then I will stand with you in the empty spaces and keep a chair at the table. The door knocked once. The private secretary slipped in with the face of news. We have the footage, she said. The room tightened. Time concentrated. Air became currency. Show me, he said. They crowded around a laptop. The screen flickered with the camera's view of a lobby too bright and too generic to be ominous. People came and went, the way people do when the building is not theirs. A woman with a tote bag. A man with a box. A courier scanning a code. No one looked like a headline. Timestamp, the liaison said. Here. A figure entered. Hood up. Head low. Nothing theatrical, just deliberate anonymity. He crossed to the desk, spoke to a clerk, paid in cash. He turned slightly. For a sliver of a second, the camera caught his face. William leaned in. The room shrank to a single square of pixels. He knew the face. Not intimately. Not like family. Not like love. But like caution. Who is he? Kate whispered. William exhaled, a sound that was almost a word. He used to be part of the perimeter, he said. Freelance. Contracted. Never fully inside. He would have known the corridors and the codes. He would have known where to stand to hear what he shouldn't. Why would he do this? The private secretary asked. Money, the liaison said. Or revenge, and said from the doorway. She had materialized with the inevitability of consequence. Or he wants to watch us chase our tails. William straightened. Find him. We are, the liaison said. Find him faster, William said. They watched the figure move through the lobby, down a hall, into a room the camera could not see. The door swung shut. The frame froze like a threat. If he has a file, the private secretary said carefully. And if he decides to release it, he will not, William said. How can you be sure? She asked. Because I won't give him time to be brave, William said. He left the room because movement kept the fear from ripening. In the corridor, he stopped and pressed his hand against the cool wood of the paneling, as if the building could absorb what he could not. He imagined calling his brother. In our story, the words would come out wrong. They always did now. He imagined saying, I chose you for years. I just never told you, because the telling would have made it untrue. He imagined Harry answering with silence, the kind that says, too late. He breathed, and the breath felt borrowed. He turned and made for the car. The liaison fell into step. Sir, if you must tell me we're not law enforcement, William said, don't. I know what we are and what we are not. What we are is fast. What we are is discreet. What we are is determined to stop a grieving family from becoming a global spectacle in the worst possible way. And what we are not, the liaison asked. He met the man's eyes. We are not going to lose. They drove. The city changed clothes, historic to modern to anonymous. The co-working building stood at the corner of a street that smelled like coffee and ambition. It did not look like a new chapter of a tragedy. It looked like anyone. Inside, everything was glass and optimism. The clerk blinked when he saw who had walked in. Words scrambled behind the man's eyes. Protocol saved him. He nodded. Sir. William's voice in this story was calm enough to confuse fear. I'm here off the record, he said. I'm just a man looking for a mistake before it becomes irreversible. The clerk swallowed. We can't. Show me the room, William said gently. The clerk hesitated. Then the liaison flashed a credential that took the decision away. They moved down the corridor. Doors on either side. Possibility behind each. At the end of the hall, a small glass office. The door opened with a soft sigh. Inside, a table, 2 chairs, a shared monitor, a smell of dust that didn't belong to the building yet. The liaison moved to the workstation, hands practiced. Logs? William asked. Cleared, the liaison said. Cameras? William asked. Blinded for 10 minutes, the liaison said. Obvious and clever. So nothing, William said. The liaison removed a panel beneath the desk. People forget the hardware, he murmured. He reached inside. When his hand came out, it was holding a small black drive taped to the underside with the kind of confidence that assumes nobody ever looks where secrets hide. The room changed temperature. Kate's voice lived in his memory. If there's a file, who holds it? In his hand, an answer. Is it the file? William asked. It's something, the liaison said. We'll see what sort of something. They did not plug it in there. They left the building the way careful men leave mines, slowly, with gratitude. Outside, the sky had the color of withheld rain. In the car, the liaison produced a secure device. He connected the drive. The screen filled with a list too small and too important. One file. No name. No date. Open it, William said. The liaison looked at him. Are you sure you want to be the first to hear it? No, William said. But I am anyway. The car hummed. The city hushed. The world compressed to a waveform on a screen. The audio began with the sound of a door closing, a chair, a breath, then a voice that belonged to a room that had felt like destiny and no exit at once. A voice that belonged to 3 men and a moment that split them. It wasn't clear at first. A mutter, a scrape, and then a sentence that did not belong to the public, rising from the speaker like a ghost that had waited for this exact hour to be believed. He heard his brother, and he heard himself. Not rumor, not memory. Not an allegation that could be denied or massaged or managed. A document. A record. A thief of plausible deniability. A mirror held to the worst minutes of a family's private collapse. The liaison paused it by instinct, as if the car itself needed oxygen. In the silence that followed, William learned what kind of leader pain can make a man. Because if this file existed, it could end more than a chapter. It could end the story. He looked at the liaison. Where else could he have planted copies? Anywhere, the man said. Everywhere. Then we're late, William said quietly. He felt the second suit tighten at his throat, the one made of duty and ash. He looked out the window, where the city kept moving because it always does. He thought of the chapel and the light and the prayer he had not confessed out loud. If there is a way to protect everything, show it to me now. The audio resumed. The next sentence ended hope. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. In our story, the file didn't shout. It whispered. And somehow, the whisper carried further than any scream. The car's cabin held its breath while the waveform crawled across the secure device. A chair scraped. A hand hit wood. And then the sentence. The one that turned a family quarrel into a constitutional crisis in miniature, rose like fog from the speakers. Stop, William said. The liaison froze the audio. The waveform went still, mid-peak. The silence that followed was not relief. It was calculation learning to walk. Play it again, William said. It played, not out of voyeurism, but out of due diligence. A future king in our imagined world auditing his own worst moment. He listened for tone, for context, for any mercy the microphone might unknowingly grant. There was none. Microphones do not love people. They love evidence. Who else has this? He asked. Unknown, the liaison answered. But the man who planted this does not behave like someone guarding a single copy. So we must assume redundancy, Williams said. Yes. He watched the city glide past the tinted glass. A woman in a red coat crossed against the light and laughed at a joke no one else heard. A delivery cyclist raced time and lunch. Life continued, gloriously uninterested in palaces. He envied it. Back to the palace, he said. They drove. The building awaited with the expression it always wore, impassive, dutiful, older than the people inside it. Inside, the air recognized crisis and made space for it. And, he called as he entered the smaller conference room. She was already there. In this story, she always seems to arrive before necessity does. You have it? She asked. He nodded. We do. We don't have all of it. Enough. More than enough, he said. She studied his face. You're holding the line. I'm holding the line, he agreed. The line is burning. They sat. The liaison placed the secure device on the table as if it were a relic. The private secretary joined with a tablet and a face that could carry bad news gently. We brief father now, Williams said. No delay. And we convene a family council. Tonight. And asked. Now, he said. The message went out through corridors that specialize in silent urgency. Footsteps threaded the carpets with purpose. The old clock on the mantel decided, without telling anyone, to tick louder. The king entered with the ritual economy of a man who knows the room belongs to him whether or not he performs ownership. He sat, hands folded, gaze steady. You've heard it? He asked. William inclined his head. A portion. And, it's damning, Williams said. The word felt indecent in a family mouth, but it was the right one. In our story, truth without euphemism is a kind of respect. How damning? The king asked. Enough to remove ambiguity, Williams said. Enough to become a weapon if it leaves our control. The king gestured. Play it. They listened. 3 men in a car returned to life in a room made for decisions. The past few days condensed to a minute and change of sound. When it ended, no one spoke. The air was careful with them. The king broke the silence. In her last months, he said softly, she repeated a rule to me as if it were a prayer. Never complain. Never explain. It was not an absolution. It was a shield. I have held it up for so long my arms ache. Anne's eyes did not soften, and yet were full of understanding. Shields are for arrows, she said. We have an incendiary. The king nodded. So the question is not whether we complain or explain. The question is whether we prevent an inferno. William folded his hands to keep them from revealing the tremor. We have to find the source's duplicates. We have to cut off dissemination. And your brother? The king asked gently. William did not flinch. We must make provision for the worst case. A public release timed to maximum damage. We prepare for what it looks like if the file is authenticated by third parties. The king considered his son. And privately? A beat. Privately, I call him, Williams said. Not to persuade. To warn. To give him the only courtesy I can afford in the time we have left. And nodded once. The way soldiers mark a plan they would die executing. We also need a legal framework, she said, turning to the private secretary. Advisory council in the room within the hour. Discreet forensic specialists on standby. If a paper trail exists, we find it. If a chain of custody exists, we break it. The private secretary was already typing. Understood. And communications? The king asked. Silence, and said. But structured silence. A calendar that shows duty. Faces that show steadiness. We drown rumor in routine. The king looked at the portrait above the mantel. The late queen's likeness in our story, painted with dignity instead of detail. She would tell us to behave better than our fear, he murmured. William breathed in on that. Then let's begin. The council extended itself without breaking form. A small group of legal advisors arrived on a back stair. An outside security consultant materialized with a laptop that hadn't been built to be beautiful. A comms director who can go a whole day without adjectives joined with a draft-holding statement that said nothing and meant resolve. Before we pretend we can steer the ocean, the consultant said, let's understand the tide. Whoever planted this drive knew where it would be found. That's theater. He likely wanted to force your hand. Why? William asked. Leverage, the consultant said. If you overreact, he gains moral narrative. If you underreact, he gains strategic terrain. So we respond at human scale, and said, no bravado. No panic. Momentum without drama. The consultant nodded. You also assume you're not the primary target. The primary target might be the younger brother in the court of public opinion. A leak frames him. You look like persecutors if you move wrong. You look complicit if you don't move. Good, Williams said. It's impossible. That means it's Tuesday. They worked. Calls routed through numbers with no countries. Emails drafted on machines that never met Wi-Fi. Files moved onto drives that live in safes made from other safes. Our imagined palace became a war room without uniforms. Between tasks, Williams stepped into the corridor where the carpet remembers history. He imagined the line of decisions that had marched down this hallway disguised as ordinary afternoons. He imagined his brother as a boy, barefoot, racing through here under a nanny's scandalized whisper, both of them laughing before they learned to modulate joy for cameras. Kate found him there, as if the palace had conspired to escort solace to the places he stopped. Tell me, she said. Pieces, he said. We have pieces. We don't have mercy. She touched his hand, a small ceremony of anchoring. Do you still intend to call him? I do, he said. Then call him as a brother first, she said. And as heir second. Let the order be clear in your voice, even if the outcome is fixed. I don't know if he'll pick up. Then leave a message for the boy who used to race you in socks down this corridor, she said. He still lives in there somewhere. He nodded and stepped into a small private office with wood dark enough to suggest privacy without needing to insist on it. He dialed a number his fingers knew better than his mind wanted to admit. The ringtone performed its theater of time. 1 beat. 2. 3. Voicemail. He spoke to the space between who they were and who they'd become. In our story, he began, because truth sometimes needs a preface. This is your brother first and the future king second. A file exists. It is evidence and enemy at once. I cannot stop what happens if someone decides to push it into daylight. I can only warn you that if it appears in public, the narrative will not be merciful to either of us. I am asking you, not as a royal, not as a man with obligations you never wanted, to be careful. If you have it, do not share it. If you don't have it, be ready. I will not brief against you. I will not speak your name. I will hold the line. But I cannot hold back the tide if someone else opens the gates. Call me. Or don't. I'll keep the chair for you anyway. He ended the call. He did not wait to feel anything. Feeling could collapse a day like this. He returned to the room where strategy breathes. Legal, he asked. The lead advisor raised her eyes. We can seek an injunction against publication once we have a reasonable belief of a publisher's identity. We can also pre-brief a judicial clerk who has handled urgent privacy matters for you before. Do it, Williams said. Communications? And prompted. The comms director slid a draft across the table. It was spare and unarguable. The House remains devoted to its public duties and will not be commenting on speculative, unverified private material. We ask that coverage respect the privacy of family conversations, particularly those occurring during a period of reflection and service. It says nothing, and said, approving. It says resolve, the comms director replied. Good, Williams said. Schedule me visible. Hospitals. Schools. Work that cannot be misconstrued as theater. We'll avoid entrances with press pens, the director said. You will be seen without being staged. Excellent, and said. Let the work be the statement. An aide slipped in with a folded piece of paper as if delivering a telegram from a previous century. From security, sir. William Reed. The co-working space camera angle we didn't have? We have it. Across the street. A florist. The feed catches our man leaving. And, the king asked. Bag in hand, Williams said. He meets someone on the corner. Recognition? The liaison asked. Not yet, Williams said. But the second person wears a lanyard from a media house. Not domestic. Foreign jurisdiction complicates injunctive relief, the legal advisor said. We'll prep both tracks. Identify the lanyard. Identify the route. Identify the next point at which we can lawfully intercede. And said, her voice the metronome that keeps a fragile song together. The room rotated through tasks. For a moment, the machine worked. The crown, in this myth, earns its gravity by moving without spectacle. Then the private secretary's phone lit with a color reserved for alarms that don't use sound. She glanced. Her posture stiffened. What is it? William asked. A post, she said. Anonymous. A countdown. To what? And asked. The secretary swallowed. To a listening party. Midnight. The caption says, "Let the people hear their princes at last." How many followers? The comms director asked. New account, but it's being amplified by larger ones. The phrase is trending already. The consultant leaned forward. They're building expectancy. The actual file may not even exist. The threat's momentum is the product. Prepare for both outcomes, Williams said. We cannot be in the position of praying they've bluffed. The king rested his fingertips on the table, as if feeling the tremor come through wood. If this emerges, he said quietly, we will not shout. We will not flee. We will put on our uniforms and do the work. And if the work is not enough? William asked. The king met his eyes. Then we continue doing it. The monarchy has survived worse than embarrassment. It may not survive hysteria. We must be the cure for hysteria. Calm. Consistency. The line you are holding. Outside, the light thinned into afternoon. The palace changed its breathing. Runners arrived with envelopes that couldn't be emailed. Someone wheeled in tea that went cold. A printer nosed out contracts like small white flags being stacked for later. In a rare pause, William found himself alone with the portrait again. He stood before it the way one stands at a grave when no one is watching, without performance, without the alibi of words. I am trying, he told the paint. I am trying to be what you wanted us to be. He didn't expect an answer. The hush gave him one anyway. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. Not quite unknown. A pattern he recognized from a life before gatekeepers. He stepped into the corridor and answered. Yes. A voice. Younger. Familiar. Edged with oceans and years. You called. He closed his eyes and leaned his shoulder into the wall. I did. You found it, the voice said. We found a version, William replied. Silence. Not the weapon. The bruise. I didn't leak it, the voice said. I believe you, William said. You won't be able to stop it, the voice added. I know, William said, but I might be able to blunt it. Another silence. Then, why did you tell them? Because pretending we were safe would have been the real betrayal, William said. Because I could not carry it alone without it turning me against you more completely. I thought you already were, the voice said. I'm trying not to be, William said. A breath on the other end. A memory of laughter in corridors and the sense that the house was theirs if they could outrun sorrow together. Then the click. The line went dead. He returned to the room where the future was being triaged. Midnight, he said. We build toward midnight. They drew up a schedule designed to show duty as choreography. Appear at a charity at 6. Return for a briefing at 7:30. A quiet dinner with the king at 8, not for food but for optics of unity. Prayer at the chapel at 9, not announced but observable to eyes that always see. At 10, a statement ready to send that said nothing but looked like steel. At 11:30, a final check of feeds and a plan for the first hour after whatever happened at 12. Who watches the account? And asked. I will, the comms director said. Who watches the family? The king asked gently. I will, William said. The palace moved like a chessboard whose pieces have learned to ignore fear. The 6 o'clock engagement came and went, and he managed the small miracle of making strangers feel like the center of a day that was devouring him. The chapel at 9 welcomed him the way old rooms do, by refusing to change. He knelt because standing would have broken him, and he said nothing because everything he could say would have sounded like a bargain. At 11:30, the core team reconvened in the room that had become a lung. The comms director had 3 screens open. We have copycats, she said. We have false links. We have accounts claiming to have the file and accounts claiming to have the truth about the file. It's a mess, which is good for us. Confusion is our friend. And the main account? William asked. Still counting down, she said. 5 minutes. The room reoriented around seconds. The king sat, still and present, a lighthouse, and stood with her arms crossed, not in defiance, but in endurance. William felt the blood in his thumbs and the peculiar weightlessness that comes when fate is a number on a screen. 2 minutes, the comms director said. Across the world. The imagined world this story asks you to enter. Phones were lifted from charging cables. Tabs were opened. Group chats grew a new column of flame emojis and theories. The public prepared to listen to a conversation not meant for them, because that is the signature entertainment of modernity, the theft of intimacy disguised as accountability. 30 seconds, the comms director said. The king looked at his son. If it comes, we do what we have always done. William nodded. We serve. The screen ticked down. 10, 9, 8. Breath became a choreography. 7, 6. The comms director's lips moved with the count. 5, 4. Anne's hand found the back of a chair, the way a sailor braces for a swell. 3, 2, 1. The post appeared. A link. A caption. Listen. The comms director clicked. The page loaded. A player appeared with a gray bar waiting to be filled. The play icon glowed. Ready, she said. Wait, William said. Let it populate for 30 seconds. If it's a trap, we don't amplify first. They watched the bar thicken. 30 seconds. Enough for millions to pile in. Enough for mirrors of mirrors to begin. Now, he said. She pressed play.